The first time they laughed at Ethan's shoes, he pretended not to hear it. He kept walking through the hallway with his head down while kids whispered behind him. His shoes were old, faded, and too small for him now. The front of one shoe had started to open near the toe, and every few steps it made a soft flapping sound against the floor. "Did you see that?" one boy laughed. "Man, those shoes belong in a museum," another said. A few students laughed louder. Ethan's face turned red, but he stayed quiet. He had learned a long time ago that answering bullies only made things worse. At lunch, he sat alone near the window and slowly opened the paper bag his father packed every morning. Peanut butter sandwich. Apple slices. Same as always. Then his best friend Noah sat across from him. "You okay?" Noah asked softly. Ethan forced a smile. "Yeah. I'm fine." But he wasn't fine. At home, Ethan lived with his father, Daniel, in a tiny apartment above an old repair shop. Daniel worked day and night fixing broken machines just to pay rent and keep food on the table. Money was always tight. Very tight. That night, Ethan carefully placed his shoes near the door and hoped they would survive one more week. He didn't know those shoes were about to change his entire life forever. The next morning, rain poured hard across the city. Ethan stepped carefully around puddles as he walked to school, but water still slipped through the holes in his shoes. By the time he reached class, his socks were wet and cold. When he entered the room, a group of boys near the back started laughing again. "Hey Ethan," Tyler shouted. "Your shoes crying too?" The class exploded with laughter. Even worse, their teacher looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Ethan quietly sat down and stared at his desk. After school, he rushed home before the rain got worse. Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by unpaid bills. The tired look on his father's face made Ethan hide his pain immediately. "How was school?" Daniel asked. "Good," Ethan lied. Daniel smiled weakly. "I'll get you new shoes soon. I promise." Ethan nodded even though he knew the truth. His father had already skipped meals twice that week. Later that night, Ethan heard Daniel coughing badly in the next room. He sounded exhausted. Ethan stared at the ceiling for hours. He didn't care about expensive clothes. He didn't care about being popular. He only wanted people to stop hurting his father without even knowing him. The next day at school, things became worse. During gym class, Ethan's shoe finally ripped completely open while everyone watched. The room went silent for 1 second. Then laughter exploded everywhere. And Tyler stood up slowly with a cruel smile. "Bro," he laughed, "your shoes gave up on life." Even the coach looked away awkwardly. Ethan felt something break inside him. He grabbed his bag and walked out of the gym while everyone laughed behind him. Ethan skipped the rest of school and wandered through the city alone. Cold wind pushed against him while cars rushed past. He sat near a small park bench and stared at his ruined shoes. For the first time in years, tears rolled down his face. Not because kids laughed at him, but because he knew how hard his father worked every single day. Daniel never bought anything for himself. His jackets were old. His hands were covered in cuts from repairing machines. Yet he still smiled every morning like everything was okay. Ethan pulled out his phone and looked at an old picture of his mom. She had passed away when he was 7. Before she died, she always told him something important. People who laugh at others usually feel empty inside. Back then, Ethan never understood it. Now he did. When he finally returned home, Daniel was worried sick. "Where were you?" Daniel asked, standing up quickly. Ethan tried to hide the torn shoe behind his leg, but Daniel noticed immediately. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel sat down slowly. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Ethan's eyes widened. Dad, no. I should be doing better for you. The sadness in Daniel's voice hurt Ethan more than all the bullying at school. You already do everything, Ethan said firmly. Everything. Daniel looked at him quietly. Then something unexpected happened. Daniel opened an old metal box from the closet. Inside were papers, photos, and one small key. Ethan had never seen it before. Daniel stared at the key for a long moment. And for the first time in years, fear appeared in his eyes. Dad? Ethan asked carefully. Daniel closed the box quickly. It's nothing, he said. But Ethan knew that wasn't true. That night, Daniel barely slept. Ethan heard him walking around the apartment long after midnight. The next morning, Daniel surprised him. Don't go to school today, he said. Ethan blinked. What? I need to take care of something. They rode 2 buses across the city until they reached the richest part of town. Huge buildings covered the streets. Fancy cars moved everywhere. Ethan felt completely out of place. Finally, Daniel stopped in front of a massive glass building. At the top were giant silver letters. Vance Technologies. Ethan stared in confusion. Dad, why are we here? Daniel took a deep breath. Because 20 years ago, he said quietly, this company belonged to me. Ethan froze. What? Daniel looked down sadly. I started this company with your mother before you were born. We built it from nothing. Ethan couldn't believe what he was hearing. But, then why are we poor? Daniel's face tightened. After your mother got sick, I stopped caring about money. I trusted the wrong business partner. He stole almost everything and pushed me out of the company. Ethan's heart pounded. But I kept one thing, Daniel said softly, holding up the small key. It opens a private safety box inside the company. They entered the building together while workers rushed around them. Nobody recognized Daniel anymore. At the front desk, a woman looked at their clothes and frowned immediately. I think you're in the wrong place, she said coldly. Daniel looked her directly in the eyes. No, he replied calmly. I built this place. The woman almost laughed. But before she could speak again, an older security guard nearby suddenly froze. His eyes widened. Mr. Vance, he whispered. Daniel nodded quietly. The guard looked shocked. I thought you disappeared. Within minutes, everything changed. Executives rushed downstairs. Workers whispered in confusion. Some older employees stared at Daniel with tears in their eyes. Ethan stood silently beside his father, unable to understand everything happening around him. Then a tall man in an expensive suit entered the lobby. His name was Richard Cole, the current CEO. The moment Daniel saw him, the room became tense. Richard forced a fake smile. Daniel. After all these years. You stole my company, Daniel said calmly. Richard laughed nervously. You signed the papers yourself. Because my wife was dying in the hospital. Silence filled the room. Ethan looked at his father in shock. He had never heard this story before. Daniel lifted the small key slowly. The original ownership records are still inside the private vault, he said. Richard's confident smile disappeared instantly. For the next 2 hours, lawyers filled the building. Old documents were opened. Hidden records appeared. And slowly, the truth came out. Richard had lied for years. He had cheated Daniel while he was caring for his dying wife. By evening, reporters surrounded the building outside. Ethan watched everything unfold beside his father. Then Daniel looked down at him gently. You know what hurts most? He asked softly. Ethan shook his head. "I never cared about losing money," Daniel said. "I only hated seeing you suffer because of my silence." For the first time in years, Ethan saw tears in his father's eyes. The story exploded across the city overnight. News channels talked about Daniel Vance returning after years of disappearance. Former workers shared stories online about how kind he had always been. At school the next morning, everyone stared at Ethan differently. Whispers followed him through the halls again. But this time, they weren't laughing. "That's him. His dad owns Vance Technologies." "No way." Tyler suddenly acted nervous whenever Ethan walked past. During lunch, several students tried sitting near him for the first time all year. Ethan hated it. Yesterday they mocked him. Today they smiled at him. Nothing about him had changed except what they believed about his money. Noah sat beside him quietly. "You okay?" he asked. Ethan sighed. "I don't know anymore." Later that day, the principal called Ethan into the office. To Ethan's shock, Daniel was already there wearing a clean suit for the first time in years. But his warm smile remained exactly the same. The principal suddenly acted overly friendly. "We'd love to improve Ethan's experience here," she said carefully. Daniel looked around the office calmly. "Interesting," he replied. The principal shifted uncomfortably. Daniel then asked one simple question. "Where was this concern when students mock my son every day?" The room became silent. Nobody answered. Ethan felt proud standing beside his father. Not because of money. Because Daniel never forgot who he really was. As they walked out together, Ethan noticed Tyler standing near the hallway corner. Their eyes met briefly. For once, Tyler looked ashamed. But Ethan still carried years of hurt inside him. And he wasn't sure if forgiveness would ever come easily. A week later, Daniel officially regained control of Vance Technologies. Reporters followed him everywhere now. People who once ignored him suddenly wanted meetings and photos. But Daniel stayed the same. He still fixed broken things with his own hands. He still made Ethan peanut butter sandwiches every morning. One evening, Daniel drove Ethan past his school slowly. The building looked old and damaged. Paint peeled from the walls. Broken windows covered one side of the gym. "Did you know," Daniel said softly, "this school almost closed last year?" Ethan looked surprised. "Really?" Daniel nodded. Most rich families send their kids somewhere else. They sat quietly for a moment. Then Daniel asked, "If you could change one thing about your school, what would it be?" Ethan thought carefully. "People," he answered honestly. Daniel smiled sadly. "That's the hardest thing to fix." The next day, Ethan overheard Tyler arguing with another student outside class. "My dad lost his job," Tyler muttered angrily. Ethan paused. For the first time, he noticed Tyler's eyes looked tired. Maybe pain existed behind his cruelty too. That afternoon, Ethan found Tyler sitting alone behind the gym. Normally, Ethan would walk away. But something stopped him. "You okay?" Ethan asked quietly. Tyler looked shocked. Then embarrassed. "My dad worked for Richard Cole," he admitted. "When everything came out, he got fired." Ethan stayed silent. Tyler stared at the ground. "I know I was awful to you," he whispered. "I just wanted people to laugh with me instead of at me." Ethan remembered his mother's words again. People who hurt others often carry hidden pain themselves. Still, forgiveness wasn't easy. But maybe understanding was the first step. 1 month later, Daniel made a huge announcement that shocked the entire city. He planned to rebuild Ethan's school completely. New classrooms. New sports fields. New computers. New scholarships for poor students. The news spread everywhere. Students screamed with excitement. Teachers cried with relief. But Ethan felt nervous. "Dad," he said quietly that night, "people will think we're trying to show off." Daniel smiled gently. "Maybe some will," he admitted. "But this isn't about proving we're rich." "Then why do it?" "Because no child should feel worthless because of money." Construction started quickly. For months, workers rebuilt nearly everything. Ethan watched broken walls become beautiful classrooms. But the biggest surprise came during the opening ceremony. Hundreds of students gathered outside the new school building while cameras flashed everywhere. Then Daniel stepped onto the stage. "I know many of you expected me to build my son a private school." The crowd listened quietly. But Daniel looked proudly at his son. "He showed me that dignity matters more than wealth." Ethan felt emotional instantly. Then Daniel smiled slightly. "So no," he continued. "We didn't buy a private school." The crowd waited silently. Daniel raised his hand toward the building behind him. "We bought this school." The crowd exploded into applause. Some students cried openly. And Ethan stood frozen beside his father, unable to speak. After the ceremony, students rushed through the beautiful new halls in excitement. But Ethan stayed outside quietly near the football field. Tyler slowly walked over. "I wanted to say something," he said nervously. Ethan looked at him calmly. Tyler swallowed hard. "I'm sorry for everything." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. Then he looked down at his old torn shoes sitting inside a glass case near the school entrance. Daniel had placed them there earlier with a small message beside them. "Never laugh at someone who is still fighting battles you cannot see." Ethan smiled faintly. "You know," he said softly, "those shoes hurt less than the words." Tyler looked ashamed again. "I know." Ethan studied him carefully. Then he finally held out his hand. Tyler looked surprised before shaking it slowly. Nearby, Noah grinned proudly while watching them. For the first time in years, Ethan felt lighter inside. Not because life became perfect. Not because they were rich now. But because he no longer carried anger everywhere he went. That evening, Ethan and Daniel sat together on the apartment rooftop one last time before moving into their new home. "You know what's funny?" Ethan said. "What?" "I used to dream about buying new shoes." Daniel laughed softly. "And now?" Ethan looked toward the glowing school building in the distance. "Now I think some things matter more." Daniel placed an arm around his son proudly. And for the first time in a very long time, both of them finally felt at peace. 6 months later, life looked completely different. The rebuilt school became one of the best in the state. Students from every background studied there together. But Daniel kept one important rule. No expensive uniforms. No luxury programs for rich kids only. Everyone would be treated equally. One afternoon, Ethan walked through the hallway when he noticed a young boy hiding near the lockers. The boy wore worn-out shoes with holes near the front. Several students nearby started whispering and laughing quietly. Ethan immediately recognized the look on the boy's face. Fear. Shame. Loneliness. Without hesitation, Ethan walked over and sat beside him. "Cool shoes," Ethan said warmly. The boy looked confused. Ethan smiled. "They remind me of mine." Then Ethan told him the entire story. Not about becoming rich. Not about buying the school. But about surviving the days when nobody believed in him. By the end, the boy smiled for the first time. Across the hallway, other students watched silently. And slowly, something inside the school truly began changing. Not the walls. Not the classrooms. The people. That evening, Ethan passed the glass case holding his old shoes again. Students stopped to read the message every single day now. Some laughed less after reading it. Some judged less. Some became kinder. And Ethan finally understood something important. The greatest victory was never becoming rich. It was making sure no child ever felt small again just because they were poor.